up, Taiwan? Thanks for joining us this weekend. I'm Joyce Tseng with the latest news. Hundreds of people have marched to Taiwan's presidential office to demand the government do more to protect public sector workers and whistleblowers. It's part of a growing push to enforce workplace safety after the recent death of a labor ministry official. Hurl Hughes has the latest.
On International Human Rights Day, public sector workers, lawmakers, and supporters are marching through Taipei, from the Ministry of Labor to the presidential office, for what they say are significant gaps in labor protections.
The key issues is the appeal system doesn't work because the officers protect their manager as well. That's the key issue.
我们是台湾，我们作为民主的社会，应该要为了这些民主，我们每一个基层员工生命都很重要，难道不应该维护一下吗？难道不应该认真的听我们人民的声音吗？
Today's march was organized by the third largest political party, the Taiwan People's Party. They are advocating for better workplace protections for civil servants and whistleblowers after a string of bullying complaints. That includes a suicide of a labor ministry employee from long working hours and severe workplace bullying. And some are here to commemorate their loved ones who died after being targeted at work.
因为我儿子在国泰医院被他的学姐霸凌死掉了，跳楼自杀，婆婆医生，对。 他在工作上刁难他、否定他，让他别人教的又说不行，所以让他无所适从，不知道怎么办。
The most recent death has made political waves across Taiwan, toppling the labor minister and launching a debate about how well Taiwan's laws protect workers from abuse. Today's march is the latest in an ongoing battle for better protections for the country's public sector workers. And given the size of the crowd gathered here today, it may not be the last. Joseph Wu and Hurl Hughes in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
President Lai Ching-te says the country must learn from mistakes of the past if it wants to implement meaningful transitional justice.
向所有为台湾人权理念付出生命、甲青春岁月的前辈，代表人民向恁致上最高的敬意。我嘛会继续努力，守护台湾的主权。
Lai was speaking at a Human Rights Day event in New Taipei City. Dozens of people gathered at the White Terror Museum to honor victims and survivors of the repressive political movement. The White Terror was a period of authoritarian rule between 1949 and 1991. During those years, thousands of people were killed and persecuted for alleged anti-state activities. President Lai Ching-te recently visited Hawaii and the U.S. territory of Guam during a tour of the Pacific. The trip angered China, which claims Taiwan as its own. Beijing is expected to launch another round of military exercises around Taiwan in response. For more on why Beijing might be stepping up its threats, Hameo Khan spoke to Lauren Dickey, a security analyst with the China Power Project in Washington, D.C.
Lauren, I want to ask you about China using these overseas trips by Lai Ching-te and the statements that President Lai Ching-te makes as an excuse to conduct military exercises. Is this a new normal?
So I think anytime that President Lai goes overseas or makes statements that somehow suggest that Taiwan is a sovereign or independent entity and that the option of unification is not on the table, China has to react to that. For them, Taiwan and that goal of reunification is such a political crown jewel that they can't let this go by without doing something. And so the Joint Sword exercise series, because we don't know how many letters are in the alphabet for them to execute, right? Like they could use a joint sword in response to any type of engagement or speech or travel as they deem appropriate. So my hope is that because, I think from the road, President Lai has shown a pretty pragmatic and even-handed approach from what I've seen. So hopefully any military response by China would also take into account the fact that, there haven't been any splashy statements about Taiwan's identity that he's made. And hopefully China will be savvy enough to calibrate in that context.
With China having conducted Joint Sword A, Joint Sword B, and now potentially a Joint Sword C, is there a concern that maybe the United States and Taiwan could maybe be complacent that these drills are becoming kind of an ordinary kind of occurrence?
I do worry about that. I think that, if you look at the history of air and maritime entry events into Taiwan's ADIZ as sort of our historical marker, when those started at a larger scale and frequency than what we had seen, it was a big shock, I think, to the United States. And the United States responded, right? There were statements, there were cautionary words put out into the public. But with time, my view is that some of that tapered off. And the U.S., in some ways, effectively helped normalize those actions China was taking toward Taiwan. And so now I think with the Joint Sword exercises continuing, indefinitely, we're confronted with the same challenge, right? Do we want to push back every time they happen? And if so, how hard should the United States push back? Or do we, run the risk of normalizing them by not doing anything? And I think that would be particularly dangerous. So it will be important and interesting to watch, in the coming days, how the U.S. and potentially allies and partners around the world also respond.
That was Lauren Dickey from the China Power Project. Taiwan's foreign ministry has criticized Malaysia for covering up an image of the country's national flag at the Kuala Lumpur airport. Photos show the taped-over flag on a sign displaying countries that are eligible for automated immigration. Though Taiwanese visitors can still enjoy that clearance, Taiwan says removing the flag has seriously damaged relations between the two sides. The foreign ministry says it will work with Malaysia on resolving the issue. In Syria, President Bashar al-Assad has been dealt blow after blow as rebel forces take control of key cities. It's been just over a week of the rebel alliance's offensive to ultimately overthrow Assad's regime. Anti-government fighters make major territorial gains in Syria, now claiming to have reached the central city of Homs, a strategic location in Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's grip on power. In just over a week, the Islamist-led anti-government offensive has taken over major cities Aleppo, Hama, and in the east, U.S.-backed Syrian Kurdish fighters took Deir el-Zor. Rebel forces say they've also reached Homs and Daraa in the south, near Jordan. It's the biggest loss of key cities for Assad since the civil war began 13 years ago, after his regime's violent crackdown on democracy protests. The ongoing war has killed over 500,000 people and displaced over half the population. As rebels captured the cities, a glimmer of hope for residents.
I love you بعالم الثورة لأنه نحن بنعشق الثورة. إن شاء الله راح نرسم علم الثورة على حيط قصر الجمهورية في دمشق. وعايشين بالذل والخوف والاضطهاد وش بدي يعني ما بعرف شو بدي أحكي. لا مي لا كهرباء لا مازوت لا غاز.
These advancements break years of deadlock in Syria's ongoing war, and they're being closely watched by countries like the United States. Washington has about 900 troops stationed in Syria to support its Kurdish allies. Meanwhile, Iran, Iraq, and Syria have jointly condemned the opposition advances, calling them a serious danger. Russia, an important ally for Assad's regime, also launched airstrikes against rebel forces. But Moscow has been focusing on its own war in Ukraine, reducing its military support to Assad.
Today, Russia does not seem to be as interested in supporting Assad the same way they supported him 9 years ago. The image of Assad and his regime is different now, not only in the eyes of the opposition and those who are against him, even in the eyes of the loyalists and those who supported Assad during this war. They feel now he is weaker, he does not have a vision, and he probably won't be able to shape the outcome of this conflict.
As some celebrate the fresh gains made by the anti-government alliance, eyes are on the capital, Damascus. According to Reuters, rebel sources claim they've reached a deal with the Syrian army to allow its military officials safe passage there in what would be a significant threat to the Syrian president. Lian and Joyce Tseng for TaiwanPlus. In South Korea, the vote on whether to impeach President Yoon Suk-yeol is underway. Earlier, Yoon apologized for trying to impose martial law on Tuesday, a move that stunned the country. He said he would accept legal responsibility for his actions, but stopped short of offering to step down. Lawmakers must get a 2/3 majority to successfully remove him. Thousands of people in South Korea have been marching in protest this week, calling for him to step down. Romania's top court has canceled the first-round election results for the presidential race after accusations of Russian meddling. The country's domestic intelligence agency says there are signs a state-sponsored actor worked to influence the race between pro-European centrist Elena Lasconi and far-right NATO critic Călin Georgescu. The agency points to the sudden influx of support for Georgescu as highly organized and part of a guerrilla campaign on social media. Moscow has denied any influence in the election. The court's decision has left voters concerned and confused.
Destul de incert, din nefericire. Este incert și nu știm în ce direcție merge, ceea ce ne sperie pe noi și pe familiile noastre.
Romania's current president, Klaus Iohannis, will remain in office until the new election is held in 2025. Now, Taiwan relies heavily on its agricultural industry, but climate change and extreme weather are threatening the country's arable land and piling stress on farmers. Wesley Lewis has more.
What started out as a labor of love has become a family business. Ms. Yang has run this small farm just outside Taipei for nearly 4 decades. She, along with her husband, grow a variety of organic vegetables on a plot of land right in front of their home, to sell to local customers and vendors. But this year has been tough. 3 powerful typhoons made landfall in Taiwan, more than any calendar year since 2008, which has put a strain on Ms. Yang's livelihood.
今年损失最惨重，种2批菜，差不多1-2个月接近采收，完全都没有收好，都坏掉。今年最惨。
But despite the losses and the extreme weather here, Ms. Yang is staying put. The high altitude, cooler temperatures, and volcanic mineral-rich soils provide the ideal conditions for Ms. Yang's crops. In fact, it's transformed the entire area into a farming community. At this specialized soil museum in Taiwan's premier university, researchers are tracking soil health across the country. And they're working to raise awareness about how global warming and unusual weather patterns are threatening the quality of Taiwan's soil.
高温就会导致呢土壤的一些性质受到影响。那降雨不规律的话，那就会淹水或者是过度的干旱，所以因此呢就会导致我们的农作物的收成受到影响。
As researchers keep an eye on Taiwan's soil health, Ms. Yang has rolled up her sleeves, busy replanting her typhoon-damaged fields for the 3rd time this season. Though there's little she can do to evade the destruction brought on by extreme weather and climate change, she says she's determined to bounce back from this year's setbacks, one tender sprout at a time. Chris Ma and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. Don't forget to visit us on the TaiwanPlus website and follow our social media. Finally, we take you to Paris for a sneak peek at the restored interior of Notre Dame. The iconic cathedral has reopened today. I'm Joyce. Take care and see you next time.
For more stories from Taiwan, Paris, France, and around the world, please follow TaiwanPlus on social media and download our app. Man, that's beautiful.